So thank you for taking the time to talk to Metal Talk. It's been a real thrill to hear that I get to talk to you. Been a Clutch fan for a long time, So
cool.
It's great to see you.
Well, thanks for having me.
The band formed in '91, and it's you and your schoolmates. So back then, did you have any idea of the journey you'd be taking? Had you had any sort of ambitions?
The short answer is no. Coming out of high school, I went to college sort of as a well, I had the opportunity to do that, but I had no idea even when I went to college, what I was really pursuing. I studied English because I didn't know what I was pursuing. And then that the band kind of started simultaneously with that. And I sometimes wonder what would have been the case with my life if the band weren't a thing. And I honestly do not have an answer, because I was not one of these people that, when I was 6 years old, decided I was going to be a veterinarian or something like that. Yeah. I do know that I was always had a creative impulse, whether it be writing or art in some form. I was never a musician, so to speak. So I think I kind of fell into this in a lot of ways. Jean-Paul and Tim were the guys in high school who were like, I'm going to be in a rock band.
Yeah.
And it was that or nothing. So I think I kind of went along for the ride with those guys' sort of focus.
Yeah, it was great. And obviously sort of things snowballed since then. You know, you toured and released the records. So you've in 2008 you got into the position where you had, see, after with various records you formed Weathermaker Music. Was that a big step for you guys?
It was a huge step. The thing was, by then, and it was kind of indicative of the music industry in general, that we had done the major label thing in the 90s, and then the last label we were signed with, we went to court to get monies they owed us, and they couldn't pay us that even though we won. So we won our masters back. And then at that point, we were like asking ourselves, do we want to do this again and sign to another label? And it's sort of like that. I think Einstein says insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
So I think that was sort of where we were at. And Jack Flanagan, our manager at the time, who was very business savvy, he kind of guided us on how to start this label. And then we met Stefan Koster, who worked at Roadrunner. So it wasn't just the four of us. There were a lot of other actors in that endeavor. But I think it's sort of it was a revelation to realize it's not about trying to sell as many records as possible. It's about getting the right amount of records to the right people.
Yeah.
And maybe slowly over time that gets bigger and bigger. If not, that's okay too. But if you're able to subsist off of this, that's a good position to be in.
I guess having your own label gave you so much autonomy. And I think I remember recently talking about the new album. Jean-Paul was saying most of the ideas don't make it to the end when you try 10 things and keep one. So you have this huge well of ideas that you bring into the studio, and because of that autonomy, you have that luxury of actually trying various things out.
Yeah. It's a bit of a schizophrenic situation, because for years the record label is sort of an adversary, and now we're the record label. So and the band. So it's a matter of kind of threading the needle of like, okay, you have all the creative freedom in the world, but that can be a hindrance sometimes. It's good to have some limitations. Of course, money is usually the number one limitation.
Yeah, yeah.
Time. You can perpetually try to perfect an album until it never comes out. But I think ultimately it's more rewarding. It's more work. There's more risk. But I'd rather blame ourselves for a mishap than at this point in our careers than someone else. It's too easy to blame someone else.
Yeah.
But when something goes right, it's that much more rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. As you say, you've got your own sort of support network, but as you say, you're restricted with time. It's nice to have all these ideas, but you're aware, that any time in the studios and everything is costing you money.
Yeah, it's I think we were always aware of that, but now even more so because ultimately that's something you have to pay back. I mean, not to overstate the obvious, but a major label who pays for the studio, the band always has to pay that back.
Yeah.
Through the sale of their records, and usually that never happens because the album doesn't recoup. So we're kind of, but now there's so many middlemen cut out. It's easier to do that. And also technology plays a big part of it because we can pretty much figure out what a record's going to sound like in our own studio with our own laptops, and then take it to the pros and know it frontwards and backwards, and we're not worried about, we got to try this song again because I didn't do it right. This is costing X amount of dollars an hour. That doesn't really ever figure into it, so it's a good spot.
Yeah. I just think with the new album, I know the initial idea for the lyrically, it was about social volatility and division caused by pandemic, by the pandemic, but then things changed on that front lyrically. And what caused that change?
Did you say the beginning of it? You said
what I read was that when you first started writing Sunrise on Slaughter Beach, there was the idea it was going to be about social volatility and the division caused by the pandemic.
I don't know if that's a misquote or where you got that from, but if I had to guess, it was actually the exact opposite.
Right.
I went into this because the lyrics are going to, in a lot of ways, carry the tone of a record.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be about any of those things. I didn't want it to be about the 2 years where everyone had the same experience and then come across like, oh, let me tell you about mine. No one wants to hear that. Yeah. I sure as don't. And also I found that those kind of confessional type songs date themselves very quickly. I like the escapism of music, heavy metal in particular. But having said that, we wrote a couple songs, and I think the first was "Strive for Excellence," which is sort of like the most party song of the album. But as time went on and every song kind of wrote themselves, I found it kind of getting darker and darker. So it was sort of like my intentions were kind of coming from the head and not the heart.
Yeah, yeah.
And as things progressed, it became, I think, lyrically one of the darker records that we've written. And that's probably because the subconscious was, flexing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't want it to be, I didn't want to sound like I was lecturing anybody about anything or, again, trying to sound special. But it was just, the music should be sincere, and to try to concoct a party album trying to ignore things, I think in hindsight would have been insincere.
Yeah. I think, you've got to stick to your own artistic integrity, haven't you? And so there's so many people who've brought out in the past 2 years like pandemic albums or pandemic songs, and just thinking, yeah, as you said, we all went through that.
Mm-hmm.
And Clutch has always struck me as a band who've always decided to plow their own very individual furrow.
Well, thank you. I think it's everyone has their own stories, and I kind of look at each song as a story. Sometimes kind of exactly what you're talking about. Sometimes even I don't know exactly what the story is. It just sounds kind of cool.
Yeah.
But it's the listener ultimately that interprets it, because the movie that plays in their head is the right one.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to kind of give it up at some point.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I gotta mute this. Speaking of,
yeah, I think there's an English band, old English band called Magnum, who've been around since early 70s, and Tony Clarkin, the guitarist who writes all the songs, said he never gives away what the lyrics are about. He said, they're up to people to interpret in their own way.
I agree. I mean, I think I have the luxury of being the first one to hear the music instrumentally. So I'm the first guy that gets to have the movie in his head.
Yeah.
And interpret what that is in words.
Yeah.
But I'm just one. I think of any fan, so I kind of whittle it down. But any fan is still going to have his or her own little movie, and I can't tell them they're wrong. It's their imagination.
Yeah, I always sort of find there's a great filmic quality about what you do. There's some great atmosphere, some of the images you use, and I think possibly that goes back to your, having got your BA. You've got that wonderful command of English, and it is that say quite filmic quality for me that you display.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm honestly, I love words. I think words are like guitar riffs. I always, even if it's, poetry and it doesn't need music, but it's an important part. I mean, so I think sometimes my favorite songs are when the atmosphere of the music matches the lyrics. And when those two things becomes synchronized, then they both kind of they're unstoppable. Sometimes I hear a great song and then I hear the lyrics and they seem like they're throwaways, and it's kind of a waste.
Yeah. But I think there's some great atmospheric pieces, particularly on the new album. I think like the closer, Jackhammer Our Names. It's got this funereal place, really understated. But it's just beautiful. Just an incredible way to close the album.
Well, thank you. It's a kind of a unique song in Clutch's repertoire, to sound sophisticated. Those lyrics I actually wrote, 5-6 years ago, in a long form. And then I was kind of just waiting, tapping my finger for the right music for those words to live in. And Tom Dalgetty, he was really fixated on this Fleetwood Mac song, kind of a lesser known song. I think it's called I'm So Afraid, which is a killer song. And it's got this kind of dark minor feel. And he was like, listen to the song. And we did. And that's sort of, I mean, ultimately the Jackhammer Our Names doesn't sound like that Fleetwood Mac song, but it's I like songs that, or the idea of limbo. There's a lot of Clutch songs like that, like Gone Cold, Regulator in some ways, Jackhammer Our Names, Our Lady of Electric Light. It's sort of a it's that particular brand of David Lynch melancholy.
Yeah.
I've just always liked.
Yeah. Of course, that is an unusual song for you guys, but I think you've really pushed some boundaries again on this album. It shows another development. Just in listening to Mountain of Bone, I've just my notes when I was writing the album review was like, gothic flavored Black Sabbath. There was those touches, and you got theremin on the album, haven't you? And when I was listening to Mercy Brown, Frenchie Davis does the vocals, doesn't she? I think it's French.
Frenchie Davis, that at the end of Mercy Brown, that's Deborah Bond. Both Deborah and Frenchie tracked on the same day.
Yeah.
But she did that one.
Because it's very sort of, almost my little note at time was is a little bit, Great Gig in the Sky by Pink Floyd. That's sort of, that is just incredible, vocal sort of flight.
Well, when we were in the studio and Tom and I were talking to Deborah, we were like, okay, at the end, you're Mercy Brown, you're wailing, and she went, oh, I know what you want. You want Great Gig in the Sky.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, we kind of want Great Gig in the Sky.
Because it's a great comparison. What a great vocal Claire Torrey did on the original.
Yeah, it's just that was a first take too.
Yeah.
And there's always something about the manic kind of almost anxiety of the very first one that you then can never be matched by trying to beat it.
Yeah.
And we had been talking about having backup vocals on our records for years, but we were always reluctant because we didn't want to take two more people on the road with us.
Yeah.
But when we recorded Sunrise on Slaughter Beach, we really didn't know if we were ever going back out on the road. So we were like, well, now or never. Okay, that and theremin and vibraphone and all the things that we would have been reluctant to normally.
Yeah. So when you tour, obviously you're touring later on this year over here. Are you going to be bringing? Is it just going to be the four of you, or are you going to be bringing extra people with you?
It's just going to be the four of us. It's hard enough to get the four of us together. I would love to, but both Frenchie and Deborah, they're full-time musicians with their own things going on, and it's kind of it'd be one thing if we were a band that was playing arenas and we could have multiple buses and the budgets for doing these things, but we're kind of maxed out with our personnel on the road right now between the crew and the band. Adding even one more person means another tour bus.
Yeah.
And that's an astronomical cost.
Oh yeah. So, maybe sort of, at some point in the future, you'll be doing, full orchestral shows with choirs and
and a bar stool to sit on. we have been doing the theremin.
Yeah,
that's easy to do. It packs in a suitcase. It's only about this big.
Yes, yeah. So obviously, we touched on the Bombs touring. Do you prefer studio work, or are you happier out on the road?
I love the 90 minutes on stage. I don't love the other 22 and a half hours.
Yeah.
I'm spoiled. I've been able to travel to a lot of places that some people only dream of. Like my parents, like they did one trip to Ireland 20 years ago, but they still talk about.
Yeah.
And then some mornings I wake up in Dublin at the Temple Bar. I'm like, oh God, I don't want to go outside. You know, that's a really awesome thing to complain about.
Yeah.
But having said that, I think I like being at home. You know, I'm a homebody with my family, but I do love the stage for 90 minutes. As far as writing goes, in the middle of it, I lose my hair. You know, it's like a love-hate relationship. But when there's that moment of that eureka moment where I suddenly realize what a lyric is about, or a guitar riff, or Dan, Tim, or Jean-Paul brings an idea that it's very exciting, that's the most satisfying thing in the world.
Yeah. You said about, not doing arenas. See, I saw you at the Waterfront in Norwich, which is a pretty sort of small room comparatively. I've seen you at the Roundhouse. I've seen you at festivals like Download. Do you have a favorite sort of tour to do, size wise?
I think we've become one of those bands that might be bigger in Europe than we are in the United States at this point, as far as if you're judging by room size. I like playing outdoors as long as it's not at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The late evening outdoor gig is fun. I like the European festival is always great. People watching. I think, there's an energy when you go into a nightclub that's, everyone's just jammed in there and has been drinking alcohol to excess that you don't really get in a cow field.
Yeah.
My favorite venue in the world probably, though, is Red Rocks in Colorado.
Right. Yeah.
It's just a geologic formation that no human could have engineered. And it's a bit of a sacred space. Well, actually, it is and was.
Yeah. They've had some phenomenal shows that they haven't. I haven't seen anyone there, but I've seen obviously the videos of you two playing there and Opeth, and just just an incredible amphitheater, and just a.
Yeah, and the great thing about it, because I used to live in Colorado, so I saw some shows there as a spectator. And there's just these two massive, the stage is here, there's these two massive rock formations. I'm not a geologist, I don't know what the proper word for them are, but they act as basically a bass cannon. A lot of times outdoors shows that you don't really get that hit in the chest, but in Red Rocks, every seat's in the middle of this giant subwoofer. Yeah. And it's beautiful weather usually. And the only drawback is the altitude. If you're not prepared for it and you're out of shape, it'll kick your ass.
Yeah. I think you work so well. You on stage, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you face to face, but I think you're an incredible communicator. You've got, I don't know, somewhere I think, and I know the comparison's always made. There's something of the sort of Southern Baptist preacher about you, with the delivery. It's very, very powerful, and you really get people drawn in and involved.
I've heard that. I think a lot of that is just nervous energy on my part, and I find it easier to sing moving my hands. I think I get that from my mother. I remember one time at the dinner table, she was talking, like this, and my dad was just like, I don't know what possessed him to do this. He said, stop moving your hands, sit on your hands and continue with what you're saying. And she put her hands underneath her legs and she couldn't finish a sentence.
Yeah.
So I think it might be genetic as well.
Yeah. Because I'm a bit like that. I use my hands a lot when I talk, and I think it's just an extra way of expressing. And I say maybe it's part of that nervous energy. You're aware you're in front of people, but then you must. There is this thought that you played in front of thousands upon thousands of people, so you must just go on stage and just be really relaxed. But I know, my view is always that if you're really incredibly relaxed, it almost is like you don't care. But I think sometimes, if you are nervous, you do want to actually do a good performance. You want to sell the songs. You want to, give people, the entertainment that they're after. So there's a lot of pressure maybe on you as a frontman in that way.
Absolutely. I think the nervous energy is good as long as it doesn't take control.
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of times where I'm like so tired before half an hour, but then when the intro starts, it's like this muscle memory where I'm like, oh God, here we go. And I feel like there's someone in the audience, their first Clutch show. You have one chance to make a first impression. You got to treat the whole audience that way.
Yeah.
Even if that person that you see in the front row, you've seen at 50 of your shows, for that night, it has to be their first show.
Yeah.
And a little bit of fear is good. It's a good motivator.
Yeah. Absolutely. So my friend James, he lives in India now. He's been a Clutch fanatic since the start, and whenever I go and see him, and wherever I talk to him, he's always talking about you. I think he went to see a show of yours, and you were in the audience for the support, and you had a chat with him, and he was like blown away. He's asked me just another question from him. You just toured with Helmet and Quicksand. He said, what have there been some really outstanding tours for you? Have you got a favorite tour that you remember from all the tours you've done?
Well, that was one of them. That was really good. A lot of fun. The Helmet, Quicksand, and ourselves with JD Pincus, but we're all from the same generation.
Yeah. So
I think everyone knew what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
And it was good. The Motorhead tour that we did in the UK, every day I was like, we're on tour with Motorhead in England.
Yeah.
What? Because I remember being on the school bus in like 6th grade, and there was a kid behind me with a Walkman, which was like, I couldn't believe a Walkman was a real thing. And I could hear this noise coming out of the little tiny headphones. Yeah. And I asked him what he was listening to. And this is the kid in like 11th grade who smoked and had a mustache.
Yeah.
And I said, what are you listening to? And he's like, Motorhead.
Yeah. And
it didn't even compute. And then I saw Motorhead on the Young Ones. It was the first time I ever saw Motorhead. So then, I was like, well, what happened? How did this happen? And it was great. It was a bit of a rock and roll fantasy camp. And it was also a good example of, despite their reputation, it was a very disciplined crew. They were very much like, it's the show and nothing else. And if what's going on interferes with the show, that thing has to go.
Yeah.
So it was educational as well.
Yeah. And I think that really helped break you really big in the UK, because I think, the touring getting on that tour, a lot of people saw you, and it was really positive.
It was
positive time.
And plus, that it was mostly in the south of England, and those drives for us of being American, we're used to 500-600 miles in between shows.
Yeah.
And we would get in the bus and we would crack a beer, and by the time we were done with that beer, we're pulling up to the next gig.
Yeah.
Which was also very nice.
Yes. Yeah. James, my buddy I just mentioned, he was at a festival in just outside of Illinois when I first met him. Well, that actually was in Illinois, rather, just outside of Chicago. And we were talking to some people there, because I took a band over there, and they were saying, some of the guys were saying, yeah, it only took us 2 days to drive here. And we were sort of thinking, we're English, we don't drive anywhere for 2 days,
Yeah.
So it must be nice. Yeah.
It was a great luxury.
Yeah, but I know our time's coming to an end. So thank you so much for your time, Neil. Really appreciate it. Really looking forward to the shows, and I'm going to certainly try and get along to the Roundhouse again to come and see you guys.
Excellent.
And the album, genuinely, it's a fantastic, really, really great album, and genuinely, just blew me away. So thank you for that, and carry on doing what you do.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for the kind words.
No problem at all. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.